we're going to be building a second wall, and it's going to be huge and go across Canada. And Justin Trudeau is going to pay for it. The Canadians are weak and seal clubbers, and I don't want them in my America. There you have it. World Supreme Leader Donald Trump has banned Canadians. With this, the NHL acts quickly. First, all 7 Canadian NHL teams are relocated to the USA. First, the Toronto Maple Leafs moved to Atlanta and become the Thrashers because I deserve to be happy and people in Toronto don't. Next, the Ottawa Senators moved to Cincinnati and become the Harambees. Vancouver then moves to Seattle to become the Supersonics. And because history teaches us to repeat, the Winnipeg Jets are moved to Phoenix to become the Coyotes. The Calgary Flames are then moved to Milwaukee to become the Cheddar. Montreal moves to Houston to become the Americans. And last but not least, the Edmonton Oilers head west and become the Anchorage Aliens. Now that Canadian players are banned, I made a list of 423 replacement players who can help fill the void of the 344 Canadian players who are leaving the league. To split up these players, the NHL holds an emergency draft where each team picks as many players as it needs to reach roster requirements. I'm going to show you all the new rosters, so if you want to skip it, skip to the time in the bottom right corner. The Anaheim Ducks pretty much lost everything with Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf leaving. On defense, they have 3 elite defensemen and then 3 not NHL defensemen. And in net, John Gibson is going to have to prove to be a #1 goaltender. Arizona pretty much lost everything on offense. Alexander Semin is going to have to step up for them. On defense, pretty much no changes at all for them. And in net, Alexander Salak is going to have to prove to be a good goaltender in his first NHL season. Boston is another team that lost a lot on offense, but their great center depth was able to keep them with 2 #2 centers. On defense, little changes for them. Brandon Carlo and O'Gara are going to have to step up huge for them. And in net, Tuukka Rask is still there. The Carolina Hurricanes took a huge hit at the center position, but I think Victor Rask is ready to be a #1 center, and I think Mark Arcobello is a good second-line center. On defense, there are pretty much no changes as the Carolina Hurricanes already boast an All-American defense pretty much. And in net, Eddie Lack is going to have to step up like he did during his time in Vancouver. Despite losing a lot of star power with losing Jonathan Toews, Brent Seabrook, Duncan Keith, and Corey Crawford, I still think the Hawks have a pretty good damn team. Columbus was a team that I don't think was hit that bad, and they also add Evgeny Dadonov on offense. While on defense, they keep their top pairing of Jack Johnson and Seth Jones. The depth is obviously a concern, but in net, they keep Sergei Bobrovsky, which should be a top NHL goaltender this year. The Dallas Stars are probably the team that gets hit the hardest. They lose Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Jason Spezza, and a lot more. I just don't see them winning at all. Karl Lennon gets an overall boost in this game that I disagree with. I don't think the Dallas Stars are going anywhere with this replacement team. The Florida Panthers lost a lot of talent, but I think Andre Kostitsyn will help replace it. On defense, they're pretty much really weak now. Keith Yandel is going to have to be a #1 defenseman, an elite defenseman, if Florida wants to win. And in that, they're really hurting with Rito Berra and Mike McKenna being their only 2 options. Now we go to the state of hockey, where they didn't really feel the effects of losing any Canadians. I mean, all of their top lines are pretty much still intact. On defense, they kept Suter and Jonas Brodin. The depth issue is a problem, but it's not that big of an issue. And net, though, is where they did kind of feel it, but they took the best goaltender in the draft and the best goaltender not in the NHL with Dominic Furch. In Brooklyn, the effects of the Canadians being banned affected the Islanders heavily. They keep the left side pretty good, and the center depth is kind of weak now, but on the right side is where they're really hurting. On defense, again, they kind of felt the effects, but they still have some good defensemen. In net, though, they keep Halak and Gray, so I still think the Islanders have a shot at the playoffs. And the other New York team, the Rangers, didn't really feel the effects much on offense. I mean, yeah, they lost Rick Nash, but again, this could be a lineup that they put out this season besides the one addition on offense. On defense, though, is where they really start hurting. McDonough is the only defenseman who is above an 81. Thomas Larkin-Gilroy is a terrible pairing. And Nick Balin is going to have to prove that he's good enough to play in the NHL. And in net, they still have King Lundqvist, which is why I think they'll make the playoffs. Philadelphia also has probably one of the most devastated offenses by it, with the only first liner being Jakub Voracek, and Michael Raphael being the only person I would really call an NHL forward. Defense, they also felt the effects, but Ghost-Behar, Gudas, and Strutt are all NHL defensemen. Provolov made the team this year, but Smith and Polsek, I don't know about them. In net, Michael Nuverant is going to have to prove to be a #1 starter like the Capitals thought he would be. Despite losing the best Canadian in the game, I don't think the Penguins are that bad off. I mean, Malkin, Hagel, and Kessel is a very good first line. Nigel Dawes is an underrated player who now represents Kazakhstan, along with Benito Hornquist. That's a good offense. On defense, again, they lost Letang, but they still have Mata, Dumoulin, and Ian Cole. Yeah, the depth issue again, but I think they'll be fine. In net, though, is where they're really hurting were Condom and Hewitt. are going to have to form a very good pair or tandem or something to figure out how to get Pittsburgh into the playoffs. The St. Louis Blues are another team who are in good shape after losing their Canadians. The center depth is pretty amazing. On defense too, they kind of take a hit, but Gunnarsson and Shattenkirk is still a good first line. The St. Louis Blues don't really have a number one goaltender, but their backup Frederick Pettersson and Wetzel, I just like his name, that's a hockey name right there. Another team who was able to lose an elite Canadian player like Steven Stamkos and still be in great position, Palat, Johnson, and Kucherov is a deadly first line. On defense, they still have Hedman, Strawman, Nesterov, and Suter. Again, they're not really affected by this. Bishop is still in net. I think Tampa has a cup this year. Now we go to the Aliens, who are definitely in the running for the hardest hit team. I mean, the first line of Maroon, Draisaitl, and Moss is not good by any means. Defense, that keeps Rebecca, Larson, Clefbaum, and Fane, but again, the defense is good, but it's not enough to lead the team. And in net, they're really going to struggle with the monster being their starting goaltender. The only thing more devastating than Harambe's death is the Harambe's lineup this year. Bobby Ryan is the only player who I think is an NHL player in this entire lineup. On defense, they're even harder hit, where Erik Karlsson is the only NHL defenseman they have. But at least in net, they have Craig Anderson, who can maybe play out of his mind and get the Harambes to the playoffs. Houston, we have a problem, and Houston, that problem is the state of the Houston Americans lineup. The first line is very good, but after that, the depth is not. Defensively, they have a good top pairing, and Makarov is a good top four, but after that, again, depth problems. And in net, they lose one of the greatest goaltenders in hockey, and his replacement is Al Montoya. Now one of the strongest teams after losing their Canadians, Blake Wheeler, Laine, Stafford, lots of talent still on the team. Defense especially, that is a very good defense. And in net, they have two good goalies with Havlicek and Hellebuck, who are capable of being NHL starters. Now we go to the Atlanta Thrashers, who are probably the most average team in this. I mean, the first line's decent, the defense is decent, but they do have a really good goaltender with Anderson and Enroth, and that's probably going to be one of the top pairings in the league this year. The Buffalo offense is going to have a hard time replacing Ryan O'Reilly and Evander Kane, but I think they can do it. On D, pretty much no changes again. Matt Svalbein is going to be the one lone weak link of that defense. And then net, they keep the Swedish pairs of Leonard and Nielsen. We're looking at a Russian-dominated Colorado Avalanche lineup with Ilya Kovalchuk, Alexander Belov, and Max Chudinov being added, along with Nikita Dozorov and Sergei Varlamov, a lot of Ovs on the team. These Russians should lead Colorado to a playoff spot. The Detroit Red Wings were probably the team that was hit the least by this. I mean, even this lineup right here, besides the few additions they had, could be a lineup for the Wings this year. The Los Angeles Kings are also feeling the pain, but they do keep Anze Kopitar and Marian Gaborik while adding Martin Erat to form a pretty good first line. On defense, they lose Drew Doughty, and Alex Martinez now is going to have to be the number one on this team, with a lot of veterans and a mix of young guys who are not really that good. In net though, Jonathan Quick is still going to have to be an elite goaltender for them, and he should be one of the best in the NHL this year with the subtraction of a lot of good Canadian goaltenders. The effects of no Canadians are devastating New Jersey, with Kyle Palmieri being the only really above second line player on the team. Defense, they feel it again, but Green, Merrill, Moore, and Lovejoy is actually a pretty good top four now. And in net, they still have one of the best goaltenders in the NHL with Corey Schneider. Think of all the big names San Jose is losing in this draft. Joe Thornton, Logan Couture, Vlasic, and Patrick Marleau, but they still pull out a pretty good lineup in my opinion. And net though is where they might have a problem, but Jonas Hiller returns to the NHL, hopefully to his former form. Here's a team that I expected to do best in this simulation. I mean, if you think of the Washington Capitals, all their best players are not Canadian. On defense, they are going to feel the loss of Alzner, but again, this is a defense the Capitals could put out at any point in this NHL season. In net though is where they're hurting. They lose Braden Holtby, and they don't have a replacement for him. The Milwaukee Cheddar have a good first line in Johnny Gaudreau, Backlund, and Frolik, but the depth is not there, and Brandon Bochenski is the only good player on the second line. Defensively, they still have a maybe average defense in this kind of simulation, with Jokapaka and Grossman being a terrible top two. Kari Ramo now returns to the franchise, and he'll have to play out of his mind. The Predators were really hit hard at the center position, but I think Peter Regan is going to have a nice bounce back season. I also think Forsberg and Craig Smith are going to elevate to elite first line status. On defense, they did lose Subban, but they kept Yossi, Ekholm, Carl, and Yannick Weber, so I think they're going to be doing pretty good. And in that, they still have Pecorine, so I definitely think Nashville has a good shot at the Cup this year. Now to Seattle, where they have the sweetest line in hockey, followed up by a pretty good second line. On defense, Edler is the only really main Canucks defenseman they keep, but Sabiza, Trampkin, Larson, Hadan are mostly better than what you'd find in the draft. And in that, they have two very good goalies with Miller and Markstrom. In the Pacific, the Kings, Ducks, and Supersonics would finish in the top 3 spots of their division, no one else grabbing playoff spots. While in the Central, the Phoenix Coyotes, Blackhawks, and Blues would take the top division spots. The 2 wildcard spots in the West go to the Wild and Predators. Now to the East, starting with the Atlantic, where the Boston Bruins won the division and the President's Trophy. The Red Wings and Lightning would grab division spots, while the Sabres take a wildcard spot. RIP to the Thrashers, Harambe's, Panthers, and Americans, which all pretty much RIP in real life at this point. In the Metro, the Penguins took the division, while the Blue Jackets and Devils also grabbed division spots, the Capitals taking the final wildcard spots. Now, the playoffs looks like this: Hawks versus Blues, Phoenix versus Wild, Ducks versus Supersonics, Kings versus Preds, and in the East, Jackets versus Devils, Pens versus Sabres, Wings versus Lightning, and Bruins versus the Capitals. So in the first round, the Blues would take out the Hawks in 6 games, the Yotes eliminated in 6 by the Wild, Supersonics would take down the Ducks in 5, and the Preds move on after 7 games versus the Kings. In the East, the Devils would move on after 6 games versus the Jackets. In another 7-game series, the Penguins would beat the Sabres. The Lightning and Bruin also move on after winning their series in 6 games. So for the second round in the West, we have the Blues versus the Wild and Supersonics against the Preds. In the East, Penguins versus Devils and Bruins versus Lightning. The Sonics would fight to the very end, but the Preds would move on over them. The Blues moved easily past the Wild in 6 games. The Penguins and Devils would also take 7 games, with the Devils moving on. And in the final series, the Bruins would take down the Tampa Bay Lightning. Conference Finals, Blues Preds and the Bruins Devils. The Bruins would pull off a sweep and advance to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Preds would advance to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time in franchise history after beating the Blues in 5 games. Now the Cup Finals, Bruins versus Preds. Yellow and black versus yellow and white. The Bruins would win 3 straight to start the series. The Preds would win Game 4, but then in Game 5, in overtime, Kevin Miller with the cup-winning goal, and the Boston Bruins are the Stanley Cup champions. Tarasenko would lead the league in goals with 57, and Backstrom would lead the league in assists with a nice assist total. Tarasenko would also lead the league in points with 100, with Malkin just missing the 100-point mark. Some other performances to note: Matthews would have a 71-point rookie season. Ghostby here would lead the Flyers with 81 points. The Penguins would have 3 players with 90 or more points. Tarasenko would take home lots of hardware, winning the Art Ross, Hart, Lady Byng, Ted Lindsay, and Richard trophies. Also taking home trophies is Bobrovsky, who would take home the Vezina and Jennings. Rosk won the Conn Smythe. The Calder goes to Austin Matthews, and the Bill Masterson to Grossman. Roman Josi wins the Norris Trophy, and the last one, the Selke to Martin Hanzal. So without Canadians, Tarasenko goes off, Bobrovsky becomes the new Price, and the Bruins are Stanley Cup champions. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like the logos used for the custom teams, you can get shirts, stickers, and more at my store at redbubble.com. Link at the top of the description. And they are all made by STB Visuals. His link also in the description. Also, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, like me on Facebook, check out the subreddit, and check out my last video where I test out what if Crosby retired. Thanks for watching again. Bye. Bye.